Elizabeth, as one of those people who really does need no introduction, I'm sure everybody here has read at least one of her groundbreaking books. I just wanted to say it is a great privilege to be able to introduce somebody who since 2003 has been a Fellow of the British Academy, and that is Elizabeth Bower.
Hello, I can't see you anymore. Hide my blushes. Gabriele Tergit's book is enormously long, and I've attempted to cover your material, which at great length, which coming at this point in the day is going to be a bit of a trial, but I'll just race through it and hope that you'll survive the journey. Tergit's Effingers offers a changing panorama of Jewish bourgeois life from the 1870s through to 1942. First published in 1952, it seemed a good closing retrospective text because it looks back across the decades. I followed Godila's illuminating contextualization of Jewish... Oh, I'll say this again. I followed Godila's most illuminating contextualization of Jewish women writers in taking Die Moderne as my topic. Godela centres Berlin and city life, as does Tergit. Her Käsebier Rot den Kurfürstendamm is still in print today, and she has a promenade named after her off Potsdam Platz. But Effingers, her hugely ambitious family novel, still languishes in the category of neglected work, I would say. Tergit began writing it in 1932, continued in intermittent bursts in Exile, in Prague, Tel Aviv, and London. And as far as I know, Effingers is currently out of print. I couldn't find it anywhere. It's very long, as I was saying, not just 600, but 747 pages of small print. And this may, to some extent, account for the neglect. From the title on, it's full of echoes of Buddenbrooks. This is not just copying the great man. These are very witty echoes. It opens in 1878, a year or so after Buddenbrooks leaves off. There's no time for comparisons, but I'll just mention the famous passage which leads into the death of Hanno Buddenbrook. It starts, mit dem Typhus ist es folgendermaßen bestellt. In Effingers, mit der Influenza ist es so. This introduces an epidemiological account of the Spanish flu, followed by the gruesome death of the beloved son. Dr. Grabo in Buddenbrooks has a Redendyname. In Effingers, there's a Dr. Friedhof. Now, Effingers is a conversational novel. An impersonal narrator describes places, happenings, provides masses of socio-economic, political, and cultural information. It's really marvelous. It's like reading a social history. But reflection on the world is mediated through first-person discussion among characters with differing views of past and present and different hopes for the future. But they do not know the future. In this way, Tergit avoids the fatalistic, backwards vision of an angel of history, which can risk reducing the past to a bloodbath and characters to victims. To my mind, this approach memorializes Jewish life better than Liebeskind's uncanny architecture, which tends to overwhelm the exhibited material in the museum, I sometimes feel. Of course, as readers, we have double vision. We see the signs, but not inexorable necessity. The novel centres on three families connected by marriage and business interests. The Effingers... The Effingers are industrialists. The Ockners and Goldschmidts are bankers. The Effingers hail from an idyllic South German town, Kreisheim. Old Matthias Effingers is a watchmaker, a skilled craftsman, a very German tradition, still but also Jewish. And he observes Jewish traditions of regular prayer in the household, at meals, and in the synagogue. His sons, Paul and Karl, moved to Berlin. They start up a factory in Weissensee, and if anybody's living there now, again, fascinating prehistory of Weissensee. And there they marry the sisters Annette and Klärchen, daughters of Emanuel and Selma Oppner née Goldschmidt. The parents' marriage cemented the banking partnership of Goldschmidt and Oppner. Now, Effingers aspires to convey how we live now, to borrow Anthony Trollope's title, except that now moves along across decades, and the way we live and understand the times is always plural. What was modern becomes old-fashioned. For example, the massive wooden toilet roll, rescued from a Wilhelmine water closet, installed in his grandfather's house, gets recycled in the grandson's tiny Weimar Republic apartment. Effingers is a family saga in the manner of Neusachlichkeit. The storyline is fragmented, it is kaleidoscopic. The narration jumps about inside the chapters to show simultaneous happenings in different places and a disparate mix of old and new attitudes and beliefs. Blogs tag die Gleichzeitigkeit des Ungleichzeitigen usefully summarizes this effect. Now, the German term die Moderne, I've always found it ambiguous as between modernity or modernization and intellectual or artistic modernism. The chapters through to the 1900s centre on socio-economic modernization. They are absolutely crammed with technical detail about industry and finance, the internal combustion engine, the stages of its invention, the shift from craft-based production of individual orders to mass production, the advent of advertising, changes in the built environment, shift from housing towards retail in central Berlin, new workers' housing in semi-rural Weissensee, the advent of electricity, water canalization, and so on endlessly. Kein lieber Gott mehr, aber Wasserspülung, das ist die neue Zeit. The text is full of such definitions of technological progress. Now, modernism is another matter. Artists and cultural commentators were often critical of or hostile to many aspects of modernization. We've heard about Kolmar later on. They were inspired less by faith in progress, but as by new revolutionary ways of perceiving self and world. The characters in Effingers constantly reflect on both aspects of die Moderne. So in our context, our focus on German Jewish identity is affected first by emancipation and secularization, then by changing family and gender relations. It's going to be a terrible rush through. Now, in Effingers, secularization does not proceed uniformly, nor per se determine the degree of Jewish social integration. Old Matthias Exile down in Bavaria is not really assimilated. He observes traditional Jewish practice, yet feels at home both as a German and a Jew. When his sons and their children visit their grandfather, they pray before eating in Kreuzheim, but they don't pray before eating in Berlin. Berlin banker Emanuel Oppner identifies as a German patriot as much as a Jew, I would say, and a Democrat, an 1848er who was forced into exile for a while. His partner Ludwig Goldschmidt identifies more strongly as Jewish, but both are pretty well integrated in German bourgeois society by way of business and culture. They live in grand houses next door to wealthy Christian families. Their funerals are attended by Berlin's political, business and cultural elite, including the Bürgermeister. But they are not wholly assimilated. The funerals are Jewish, and the parents steer their children to marriage within the Jewish community. Now, Ludwig's intellectual brother, Waldemar, he is all too aware of barriers to integration erected on the German side that still survive. According to Waldemar, the emancipation of the Jews on the principles of the French Revolution was based on the assumption that the Jewish minority would eventually merge with the German majority. As it is, however, Jews suffer discrimination in fields such as the law, the army, or the universities. But Privatdozent Waldemar, a notable lawyer and intellectual and art collector, decides not to convert, just to become a professor, even though, like Heine and others before Heine even, he admires Jesus, not as a god, but as the man who sprach das Vernichtungsurteil über die jüdische Nationalität. Gab der ganzen Menschheit das jüdische Bürgerrecht. Sich aber heute zu ihm zu bekennen, heißt die Mächtigen anzuerkennen. Es ist ein Kota vor der Macht. So Waldemar belongs in a left liberal tradition, stretching back to the Jewish Enlightenment. Values rooted in Judaism should evolve into the universal values of liberty, equality, and fraternity. But for Waldemar, as long as the Jews are still eine verachtete Rasse, der Platz eines Kämpfers für das Recht ist bei den Juden. Waldemar's self-identification as a Jew is not grounded in religion or descent, but in a political ethics of justice and cosmopolitan opening, or should I say international opening, beyond national and religious barriers. Now, religious toleration and political emancipation were a modernizing process, a huge part of Jüdin und Moderne, fueled by and fueling economic expansion in the Prussian lands from Friedrich the Great on. The earlier chapters focus heavily on the men as the economic agents and heads of family. Emancipation of women, judging by this novel, lags by a good half-century or so. In the early chapters, marriage is intimately bound up with business. Daughters with dowries are married by mutual agreement between families. But by the 1880s, the transactions are getting harder. As Ludwig Ockner puts it, es ist heute gar nicht so leicht, eine Tochter richtig zu verheiraten. Die jungen Leute, die eine echte Existenz haben, wollen hoch hinaus. So young men from good families marry up, young women are married down, but hopefully to somebody up and coming. Karl Effinger ist ein junger Mann, der aus gar keiner Familie ist, so Ludwig fears. But his wife Selma reassures him. Ich habe sehr gute Auskünfte über den jungen Effinger. Now this reminded me of Lisa Bauer's anger in the teens of the 20th century on discovering that Kafka's mother had hired a private detective to gather information about his fiancée, which came out at their process, you know, in 1913. Education beyond basic schooling is not worth it for daughters who must marry young. As her mother puts it, Annette kann 2 Winter tanzen, auch 3, aber dann ist es doch aus. Fortunately, Karl Effinger falls head over heels in love with Annette before he's even seen her. Annette immediately gives up a flirtation and they marry. They live pretty happily together and have 3 children. And Annette is one of these very lively mothers who is always doing things for herself and her children and really enjoys a kind of matriarchal role. Now, a recent demographic study of Bohemian Jewry writes of the Jews as a demographic avant-garde. Generations born from the 1840s through to the 1870s straddled a historical shift typical of modernising societies from high to low birth rates. I don't know what people feel about that kind of study. Well into the 19th century, according to this Bohemian study, birth rates among Jews remained higher than average. But by the early 1900s, proportions of unmarried Jews was markedly higher than in the population overall. And I was very interested in this because of the bachelor figure in Kafka's work. Now, the extended family of Effingers displays a comparable drop in early marriage and childbearing. The crumbling of the old system of arranged marriage brings new freedoms, but it also traumatises women on whom the pressure to marry weighed and still weighs more heavily than on men. Modern ideas of sexual freedom and of marriage for love rather than business hit up against a double morality policed by spiteful gossip, which punishes any signs of sexual agency or desire in young women. And young men, keen on sexual freedom, nonetheless despise young women who respond. And there are some of the men who still often marry for money, untravelled by an older patriarchal ethic of protective duty towards women, that they be pregnant, for example. The Opner sisters, Annetta and Clairchen, find fulfillment in marriage to the Effinger brothers, who bring family values inherited from old Matthias down in Kragsheim. But the third Opner sister, Sophie, marries a cold, cruel money grabber and chooses to divorce, a new freedom becoming open to women. Sophie becomes an artist, an elegant Weltdame, surrounded by admirers. She travels through Paris, Rome, Berlin. Yet she spends her life consumed by a neurotic longing for love and growing desperation to persuade ever younger lovers to marry her. Sophie is of an age to be psychoanalyzed by Freud if only she'd gone to Vienna. And modernity induces neurosis in women, moving out of the sheltering but imprisoning family into a new world where, bereft of old protections, they're still subject to old prejudices. Now, Tergit gives a completely different view to my mind of the supposed neurasthenia, of Jewish women. It's not to do with Jewish inheritance or anything. It's because of this shift in practices of marriage and the changing social conditions. Now, Sophie's nieces, Marianne Opner and Lotte Effinger, I hope you're following these family trees, are the main female characters in the second half of the novel. Marianne remains single, and Lotte marries only in her early 30s, and various of the men don't marry or live with mistresses. Now, Lotte and Marianne are new women who enjoy economic emancipation but suffer stresses carried over from patriarchal tradition. Before the war, Marianne does years of voluntary social work in the ambit of a left-leaning but sometimes anti-Semitic wing of the women's movement. I need to consult you about this. After the war, she has a successful career as a civil servant. Lotte's history is more checkered. As a teenager, she commits the sin of taking the initiative. Girls are supposed to receive, not to write love letters, as Lotte does. Her reputation is damaged and she's banished for a while to Kragsheim, but is eventually welcomed back into the family. Older, punitive attitudes are softening. She goes to university in Munich, then Heidelberg, where she holds intellectual conversations about Nietzscheanism and the like. In Munich, she bumps into an aunt who's an unfaithful but unpunished wife. I think an interesting modern figure. Female adultery is punished in the Bible, in biblical times, by stoning, and in modern times by falling under trains or taking rat poison, but is now tolerated in sophisticated circles. Lottie has lost trust in herself and in men, but eventually she and her cousin Erwin fall deeply in love, marry and have a child. But Erwin is unfaithful towards the end of Lottie's pregnancy already, and they opt to live apart, again a modern move, and consign their daughter to the care of Lottie's parents. On completing her studies, Lottie becomes a stage and film actress, has an affair, gets pregnant again, and contemplates abortion. But she and Erwin at this point get together again, and they keep the child. Now this turbulent marriage, and a lot else as well in the novel, exemplifies the loosening of sexual mores in the roaring 1920s Berlin. But Lottie and Erwin's reunion also has a utopian quality, I'd suggest. It's a kind of post-patriarchal marriage. That Erwin lovingly fathers a child he did not beget signals departure from the biblical begetteries, the scriptural foundation of Jewish descent through family lines, patriarchal family lines. Lottie's unmaternal withdrawal from her firstborn and readiness to contemplate abortion, which she doesn't actually go through with it, signal departure from woman's status as the vessel transporting Jewish identity down the generations. On the other hand, this union of cousins does not convey a tabula rasa of Jewish identity. Rather, it suggests a turning inwards towards family again and Jewish solidarity, comfort, at a time of rabid German nationalism and rising anti-Semitism. Now this kind of utopia, of actually turning in again, that's why I was interested in the turning outwards. It contrasts with Waldemar's utopia of jüdisches Bürgerrecht opening out to all humanity. The later chapters reference Jewish youth movements in parallel to the Wandervogel, and many Jews were turning from German Jewish identification or from cosmopolitanism to Zionism and Jewish nationhood as the path to self-realization. We've talked about this already. After 1933, Marianne goes into exile and moves to Palestine, along with her cousin Lottie's daughter, the daughter that was left to pursue her studies. And in 1938, Lottie and Erwin, with little Emmanuel, the other child, visit Palestine, where Marianne works in the orange and lemon groves, and Susie belongs in the children's house. This is a cultural shift from urbanity to ruralism, and from family to a kind of socialist communitarianism. Now, according to Christina Ulmer, I just saw on the internet that she died just a few months ago, aged 56. Anyway, she has an Edward essay on Tergit, and she says that Tergit was not popular with Palestinian Zionists. As Christina puts it, for Tergit, Berlin was not just a city, but a form of living and thinking, and was very different from Zionist ruralism. I'd add that Tergit belongs in a left liberal tradition, sceptical of collective identity, whether of class or religion. In the epilogue, Lottie and Erwin visit Berlin in 1948 and wander through the ruins of the houses their grandparents inherited. I meant to consider these houses as Bakhtian chronotodes. The novel's so long, you know, and I didn't start to write this paper until, you know, about 3 days ago. And I would, with another fortnight, I would actually have centred on the Bakhtian chronotope of the house. In the 1880s, the German bourgeoisie in Berlin are moving into ever bigger houses, but under the impact of war and inflation, they're forced to downsize into 1 or 2 rooms in their big houses, or cramped little apartments. Gabriele shows this in great detail. The dwelling places are getting smaller in step with an exodus from sheltering reliefs and any sense of Heimat into, people are exiting into ever-expanding space traversed by accelerating multidimensional change. And they will end either in death camps or scattered across the globe. Now, reading this novel, to start at the last word, I was constantly afflicted by a sense of uncanny affinities with the mood in England now. And the emphasis she has actually on housing, because I think in our country, housing problems within economic difficulties and the associated emotional and symbolic meanings that we invest in the places we inhabit seems to be a key factor in inducing the search for scapegoats to blame for economic ills. And on that cheerful note, I finish.